3 minutes late. We are just past 10 o'clock and we're going to be talking now about EHCPs and funding. We have the lovely, amazing Sana and Stephanie C, who will be talking about what an EHCP is, as Stephanie refers to it as the golden ticket. How do you get one? How do you realise it's fit for purpose? What do you do if you're not happy with the EHCP, or with the child's school placement or level of support? That's going to be a really important topic. And tribunals, how do you effectively challenge the local authority? Amazing.
Yes, so all in half an hour, which
26 minutes.
Oh, 27 minutes, okay. Yeah, so we're going to have to keep it pretty high level because this is a huge area and there's lots of, complexities and problems, but we'll try and keep it to the main, points, the things that are really going to hopefully make a difference. So, yeah, we've left it quite late to do the most exciting part of this whole summit, which is the legal part, right? So hopefully, though, there's enough of you on here and that you watch this recording because really this is one of probably, particularly in light of the SEN crisis, the funding issues that schools are facing. It is just now critical that you understand that firstly, there is an educational health and care plan. It exists, and also obviously understand how to get one. Because unfortunately, many parents don't know about the education health and care plan. So basically, they're the old statements. But again, a lot of parents who have children don't even know they've actually got special educational needs. The school might not communicate it to them. So, it's very important that parents get educated not only in SEND, but in navigating the SEND legal framework. So we'll try, Sunil and I will try and do that a little bit for you tonight. But again, because we're dealing with the law and very much comes down to definitions, which I'm sure Sunil has experienced in tribunal, it's something that you definitely want to seek advice from an advocate for when you get down to the actual legal definitions and interpretations. So as Joanna said, an EHCP, it is like a golden ticket. It's a golden ticket in that, you're lucky to find one, you're lucky to get one, because it's very much a postcode lottery. So depending on what borough you live in, the local authority will have, a particular template or in terms of understanding the law as well. I mean, many local authorities don't really understand the law that they need to apply, and many of their policies are actually illegal. And this is something that's come up recently through judicial reviews where parents have crowdfunded and brought actions against councils for illegal policies and been successful. So there's definitely more education, more advocate parents, which is fantastic. But there's still a long way to go. And so the more you can educate yourself, the better, because often as well, when you go to a school and you've tried to get all the support you can for your child at school, and the SENCO will tell you, look, we're doing all we can, but I don't think your child's needs are severe enough to get this education, health and care plan. And, as the parent, you're just going to listen to the SENCO, who is, you would think, the expert. But unfortunately, sometimes the SENCOs, a lot of the time, they just don't have the training in the SEN legal framework. So again, this is something that a lot of the groups and advocacy groups are trying to lobby for this, initial teacher training and training SENCOs and SEND. Just having a look at this question. This is another big problem. But before I go and answer this question, I guess it would be helpful to talk about what an actual education, health and care plan is. I just wanted to give you the context around it. So what the plan is, it's a legally enforceable contract. If you are successful in obtaining one, then basically it's a very comprehensive contract that sets out your child's special educational needs, the provision for every need. So provision that could be like occupational therapy, speech and language therapy. It could be, specialist teaching. Again, though, it has to be very specific in your plan to, the type of provision, hours, and the person that's going to deliver it. The law is very specific about it being very specific. So again, you can get advice around that. But the main thing is that the local authority has a legal duty to secure the provision in the plan. And that's the crux of it, because that's the main part of getting an EHCP, because in schools, you've got SEN support, but again, it's the funding issue. And it's not, there are legal obligations by the school to provide provision to meet children's needs. But again, in practice, it's that lack of funding and resources that really kind of constrains these schools that do often, they want to help. You know, I've got a lot of friends that are teachers that they say to me, we're not in teaching for the money. We're here because we love it and we want to do a good job. And being a governor in a school, I know that kind of firsthand, at least the school that I work in. They really do care, but there's so many schools in poverty. So the EHC plan is really sometimes the only way to be able to, one, find out what your child's needs are, to get, your child's needs assessed, because the school can't afford an educational psychology assessment, and then to, secure the actual provision. So a lot of parents, though, are discouraged, as I said earlier, by SENCO, for instance, from applying because they don't think the needs are severe enough. But what they don't know, which Sunil, I'm sure, comes up in tribunal all the time, when the local authority knocks back a request for assessment, is that they don't know the legal test, which is quite low, Sunil, isn't it, in terms of...
That's right, yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to expand on my section, yeah. But yeah, it's quite easily, parents can easily challenge it.
Yeah, so because the test, it's a may have kind of special educational needs, whereas parents don't know that. It's actually quite low, and I know that some schools they're applying for EHCPs just to get the needs assessed, so they can get an educational psychologist, in, because they can't afford it. But that's you've got to be pretty desperate, because the process, which we're going to have to outline really quickly, it's quite involved, it's quite complex, and you can there's these hurdles, and the main hurdles is, Sunil will probably go into, it's the first request for assessment, so requesting for your child to be assessed for an EHC plan, and then if you're approved for that, so if your local authority decides to proceed with assessment, it's then whether or not the local authority is going to issue a plan, and then if a plan's issued, it may not be the plan you want, which Sunil will talk all about that as well. So, but again, it's really important that you do get either advice, but even representation, because local authorities will try it on, as Sunil will talk about as well. Local authorities, again, if they don't know the law, and because of the funding constraints, will push and not take advantage of parents' lack of knowledge, but they generally just might not know. So I'm just reading a question here. SENCOs may have limited knowledge of the legal requirements. That's very true. Limited experience with specific SEN conditions. Yeah, and this is the issue. I'm very much all about education in this space. It is so, it all comes down to getting educated.
I think people's experience is that SENCOs vary in terms of knowledge and experience and expertise. It varies from school to school. I think that's most people's experience.
Yeah, it really does. But it helps if the LA knows that there's a lawyer on board or an advocate that has experience. Yeah, then you get a different response. So it is appalling. There was the Education Select Committee. They had a SEND inquiry that just came to a close. It was a 1-year inquiry, and the conclusion was basically that the SEND system, is not helping anyone that has no knowledge or resources, to tackle the system. And obviously that's a problem, because parents of children with SEN don't have a lot of time on their hands. And they're just struggling to get by the day to day, when you've got children with SEN, which I do. Literally for me, it wasn't until I quit my job as a lawyer in a bank to actually start the EHC process. I just didn't have the capacity. So, I'm a lawyer. So, and then dealing with the local authority and going through the process as well. I was just amazed at how, even when the local authority knew that they were dealing with a lawyer, they still insisted on like a mainstream placement when I requested a specialist placement. And I had very good reasons. So I just kind of whacked them with a 19-page legal argument to stop so that I wouldn't go to tribunal. But, not everyone's a lawyer. So I was horrified, Sunil, that that's the way they treat lawyers, and the way they, and that it's so difficult for a lawyer even to get through this process. It's just, it's the most vulnerable that don't even apply for these.
I mean, it's a very stressful, demanding process on parents, and they feel they're constantly having to fight to secure the right provision.
Yeah, it's someone's asked, any tips please for the day of the EHC assessment? An educational psychologist is popping into our daughter's school to assess her, and we want to make sure they really understand her requirements. Yeah. So do parents talk to you about this type of thing, Sunil?
I think that the advice is that part of the assessment is that the educational psychologist will normally meet with the parent, and I think it's really important that parents are honest about their perception and their feelings about the children's needs and what they think is required, because that's all that's going to be recorded. It's quite possible that the ed psych might have a different view than yourself, but it's important that you do ask that you do express your views to them, and so it's recorded in their reports.
Yeah, it's definitely go in there. I remember when my daughter was having her assessment, and what kills you as a parent is hoping that they don't miraculously have an amazing day and all of a sudden everything comes together. It happens. I'm sure you probably have this, Sunil, and that's why with appeals and things, the child, in the reports, and you're maintaining that they can't do something or they've got this level of disability, and the assessment.
It becomes difficult when parents dispute. There's a tension when parents say the child is not making progress at school, and then you've got the school saying that the child's making okay progress, and then you begin to. This is where a lot of disputes begin, and very often the local authority educational psychologist will support school, and parents unfortunately often have to commission independent educational psychologist reports and to carry out their own assessments to kind of get more of an independent perception view on the situation.
It's very costly, isn't it, Sunil?
Yes, unfortunately, but I suppose, and I'll get into this in my talk, it's unfortunately that parents need evidence if they're going to contest local authority decisions, and especially if they're going to go to tribunal, that's what it's going to come down to, is evidence.
Yeah, it all comes down to the evidence. I just saw another question. Apart from doing a judicial review, if LA is not implementing the EHCP, is there anyone else I can complain to? So we do with the ombudsman, Sunil.
Yeah, ombudsman is it's quite a lengthy process, and it's more to deal with complaints about the service. So it's not, while you've got the threat of an ombudsman, which might cause local authorities to be moving, I think in my experience, the judicial review action gets more of a speedy result, because it's almost immediately you'll suddenly get like the local authority legal departments becoming involved, and because it's a threat, you see, as you know, it's a threat for the case to be heard at court. So I think in my experience, that is probably the best way. I know the question's about if there's another way, but technically, if a school or local authority is not fulfilling what they should be doing as outlined in the EHC plan, that is the best way. That is a correct route, I should say. I mean, you've got the complaints procedure. You can write to the head of SEN. You can write to the director. That might get some response as well.
Yeah, because the local authorities, their SEN divisions are getting investigated by Ofsted.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
and those
yeah.
kind of complaints are recorded. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good. There's now more scrutiny on the LAs to make sure they are delivering. There's a lot of questions. I mean, we knew that, you know, that there are a lot of questions
Yeah.
about EHC plans again, because it's kind of it's just not understood, because that information, the schools just don't understand, and then they're passing on, you know, wrong information to the parents. So yeah, it's really important that you get the right information. So someone's saying here, my child's only able to make progress because we're paying for OT and one-to-one support. It's not sustainable, hence we're applying for EHCP. I just lost the question because there's more coming. Will they say we can continue and she's making progress? So no, they're under the law as well. So long as you can prove that she's only making progress because of this support, that's fine. So that's under the law. So yeah, but if you're paying for a team one-to-one support, if there's a need, even if I mean, obviously, if you pass the first threshold, they may have SEN, but you've actually got special educational provision. I mean, that's what occupational therapy is. It's definitely worth a go. And Sunil, someone asked what a SEN Advocate was. So that's something that you do exclusively. I don't represent parents. We were talking about this before. I'm more coach and consultant and an advocate, but I more advise parents on the grounds. You know, do they have a case? Yeah, maybe that. But then in terms of, and then I can help with argument. But then if it goes to tribunal, that's where I'd get Sunil to help.
Yeah. Did you want me to sort of jump in now about tribunals?
Are you going to cover placement as well?
Or did you want to start that off?
Okay,
No.
really quickly, because obviously.
Yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah, so another thing with the educational health care plan, a big thing is placement under Section I. So when you're finalising your EHC plan, you have to name the school that you want your child to go in, or you don't have to. You could keep it open for the LA to suggest, but definitely better for you to know which school is going to meet your child's needs. And so a lot of parents, there has been definitely an increase in specialist schools being named, which probably doesn't do anything for the SEN funding crisis. Yeah, so it's only exacerbating the funding crisis, and the government actually are now more aware that they need to do something about it because it's not sustainable. But it goes to show that mainstream education, the inclusion, aim and drive isn't really working very well. But there is a presumption. There's a presumption in favor of mainstream school. So if you're a parent that has a kid with special educational needs and your school is putting pressure on you to, find a different school, the thing is, if you want your child to go to mainstream school, then there's that presumption in favor of that, unless it's incompatible with the efficient education of others, or it's against the parents' wishes. So, and then the other part of that, with a specialist school, if it's not a Section 41 approved school, then you also don't have that, the benefit of the preference, parental preference, the local authority honouring parental preference for a school. So then you've got to go down a Section 9 Education Act, which again, we don't really have time to talk about right now, but if anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to follow up with me or Sunil, and I'll let you go. Sorry.
Okay, you ready? Okay. So I think that brings us just to my talk. We're gonna have to speed through this. Just generally, tribunals. I mean, at the moment, the current landscape is that there's over 6,000 registered tribunal appeals at the moment, and what this represents is a 26% increase over the last few years. And what's interesting is when the government brought in the 2014 SEN reform, they actually hoped that the numbers of tribunal appeals would decrease, and the actual opposite has happened. There's been a huge increase nationally, and more parents are having to appeal to the tribunal to secure the SEN provision, schools they want. But thankfully, the statistics show that around 89% of parents succeed with their tribunal appeals, wholly or in part. So that's good news in one sense, but it is a very long, demanding, costly stressful process for many parents. Just for the viewers' information, you get the right of tribunal every time the local authority has finalised your EHC plan. Also, after every annual review, you get the right to tribunal. And there's a few main tribunal appeals, which I'll just sort of run through. The first one, which I'm going to talk about in more detail in a moment, is a refusal to carry out an EHC assessment. The other one is the refusal to issue an EHC plan. The other kinds are the contents appeal, Section B, which are the needs, Section F, which is the provision, and Section I, which is the placement. And also we have the other type of appeal is ceasing to maintain, where local authorities attempt to cease the EHC plan. Parents can now also, under what we call the national trial, appeal against the health and social care elements of the plan, and the tribunal can make what we call non-binding recommendations. But let me just get into some of the details here about, because I know one of the questions I saw pop up was, my local authority has refused the EHC assessment, and this is extremely common. Now, most of the time when local authorities refuse to issue an EHC plan, then it's normally based on illegal reasons. They'll normally say something like, it doesn't meet their criteria, your child hasn't seen the educational psychologist, the school hasn't shown how they've used their £6,000, all these different reasons which are often used. But the problem with all those reasons are that they're illegal, and the legal threshold is very low, in the sense that the law is very simple, that if a child has SEN or might have SEN, and might need special arrangement, special provision, then the local authority must carry out the assessment. That is the very sort of law we rely on. And when parents appeal to the tribunal, the statistics show around over 90% of local authorities, they don't actually go all the way to the tribunal, they just concede, because local authorities, later on realise that they can't defend themselves against that law, because it's simply, if a child's got a diagnosis, struggling in some way, then they'll just simply be ordered to make the assessment. So it's quite an easy thing to challenge. But parents, I've seen this over and over again, where parents, we do a tribunal appeal, and the parents, the local authority can actually change their mind normally very quickly. But it's really, it goes to show that, as parents, and if you don't actually push, you don't actually get. So that's often the first hurdle which parents have to overcome. In terms of the actual section B and F, often parents say the EHC plan is unsatisfactory, doesn't describe my child's needs very well, it's very vague, the provision is not very clear. One of the big questions I get is from parents is they're not happy with the level of speech and language therapy or occupational therapy. Very often therapists are recommending provision which only they're able to provide as a service, rather than what the child actually needs. So parents come to me and say, how much I feel my child needs more therapy, what can I do? And my answer is always the same. What they must do, unfortunately, they have to commission independent speech and language therapy report, or occupational therapy report, to actually show an alternative view. Very often the independent reports are far more detailed, they're far more specific, and they're normally actually normally much better than the local authority reports. And even in tribunal, I've seen this, where the independent reports, when they're very specific and detailed, often they're accepted past over the local authority reports. So in order for a parent to begin to contest level of therapy, they need to actually have their own independent reports. It must be based on evidence, and ultimately any claim related to provisional need, it needs to be based on evidence. So quickly moving on, placement or school setting, which we talked about earlier, about changing the setting. Typical situation, local authority has a choice of school, parents are not happy with it, they want another type of school, and it might be an independent special school which is more expensive. How can parents challenge that? the only way they can challenge that is to demonstrate that the local authority school is unsuitable to meet their child's needs. For example, it can't offer the right curriculum, doesn't offer the right kind of peer group, it doesn't have the expertise or the therapeutic input which the child needs. So these are ways parents have to demonstrate. Normally, the most effective way of doing this is commissioning an independent educational psychology report. It is unfortunate because it just means that if parents want to actually effectively challenge local authority decisions, and if they do end up in tribunal, it will be about evidence. So it's unfortunate parents do actually have to commission these kinds of reports. I saw one of the earlier questions was that the parents, the local authorities told a parent that the school they want is full. Now, if that school is a community school or maintained school, maintained by the local authority, being oversubscribed or being full is not a legal reason to turn down, refuse admission, and it can be challenged. The criteria is very simple. It's based on three elements: need, resources, and the big one is showing how your child's attendance will be incompatible with the education of other pupils. And that's basically showing how the attendance of your child will affect the education of other pupils. I know that I could see there was another question about legal aid and the cost of private reports. Parents there is legal aid available. I understand that it's quite a strict criteria, but if you do happen to meet that criteria for legal aid, all the professional independent reports will actually be covered. It is unfortunate that parents are in a position where lots of parents and families I work with, they don't meet the criteria for legal aid, but they may find a traditional solicitor very expensive. So someone like myself and others kind of fill in that gap to provide advocacy support. And as Stephanie did say earlier, it is it's not a level playing field. And I've found and seen over and over the years that once a parent commissions an advocate or solicitor or someone to represent their interests, they are treated differently. Their case is given a kind of different priority. So I just saw another question. I saw the word ABA pop up.
Can I stop you there just for one?
Yeah, go on.
Just for one point, because I know that we did an amazing Facebook Live quite recently.
Yes.
One of the questions really that came up was about the private assessments.
Yeah.
Are they recommended? Are they accepted? And I'm actually asking this question on behalf of our friends Autism Unraveled. So what is your opinion with regards to private assessments?
Well, generally, the private reports tend to be of a better quality, far more thorough. I think I gave this example in the Facebook Live, is that when I went to tribunal a few months ago, we had the local authority NHS reports and we had the private reports. And immediately the judge rejected the local authority reports because he said they were vague, they were not specific, and he immediately accepted the independent reports, which were far more thorough. See, what tribunals are looking at, they want reports to be specific. They want them to be detailed.
So on that point, and I am going to talk about the amazing Autism Unraveled, because they are a multidisciplinary team. And when we talk further about this, it is about having all the evidence, and those guys work together to present that information. It's just not just one professional, they're working together. So I guess that is that has an even better impact.
Yes. Yeah. So what was that?
So the fact that it really depends, I suppose, on how the professionals are working as well, that it's not just one individual, that can even be two, and that can be even more powerful.
Yes, definitely. If you've got a team of like a multi-agency team working around your child, and it's proved to be an effective model or program that's working, and the child's making progress, that's powerful evidence to. And ultimately, if that's the case, the principle is that if it's necessary and it's proven to be effective, then ultimately it can be written into the EHC plan. often parents have to go all the way to tribunal, but if the evidence is there, and it's meeting the child's needs, and that's what it's about, because tribunals aren't interested in diminishing budgets by local authorities. All they're interested in is applying the law, recognising the child's needs, and ensuring that the child gets suitable provision.
Yeah. Anything else you both want to, and Steph C as well, want to follow up with? Because we're 3 minutes over time.
It's just the importance, isn't it, Sunil, that this is like really in this SEN fund, the environment, it's crucial to securing, it's your child's best possible kind of chance at, getting the best possible educational outcomes. And also one thing I didn't talk about at the beginning was Section A of the EHCP, which is about the child, the views and aspirations, because so often the child gets lost in all of this, and so it's great that the EHC plan, has got that section on the child, and and it forces the parent actually ask the child, so that's good, and that you've got your